So the timing of this NRA convention, guys, really was something else. It really was. You just had the Uvalde, Texas school mass shooting with 19 children who died. Some teachers died as well. The gunman was killed by a Border Patrol agent. Soon thereafter, just a few days after, there was the NRA convention, and it was in Texas. It was in Texas. I think it was in Houston. And Abbott pulled out of it, the governor of Texas, and he just sent in, like some little videos. Ted Cruz and Donald Trump did not back out of it. They did not. And this is an instance of them being unable to read the room, because the poll numbers that are coming out now on various gun reforms are through the roof, whether it's universal background checks or high-capacity magazine bans or even like a new testing and permitting system and like training in order to own a gun, and even the assault weapons ban now is at 63%. So they weren't able to read the room. And so it backfired, them showing up to this thing. Now, there was one portion where Donald Trump read out the names of the kids who were killed in this mass shooting, awkwardly mangles a bunch of them. And then at the end of it, they start playing, his music, his like theme music or whatever from the walk off stage, and he starts dancing. Oh, it's so dystopian, and it's so awkward, and it's so out of touch with the moment. So they regurgitated their standard platitudes on guns, things that are empirically incorrect. But at the same time the NRA convention was going on, there was a protest outside that was colossal. It was massive. There was at least 1,000 protesters outside the NRA convention. So let's take a look at this little CNN report on it, and we'll comment as we go along here.
Even amid the devastating tragedy in Uvalde, the top gun lobby in the United States, the National Rifle Association, pushed ahead with its annual convention held in Houston, just a few hundred miles away from here. Texas Governor Greg Abbott canceled his in-person appearance, and instead his remarks were pre-recorded for the event. Yeah, former President Donald Trump and other GOP leaders that did attend rejected efforts to overhaul gun laws, actually mocking Democrats, along with activists who are calling for change. Here's CNN's Ryan Young, who's in Houston with more.
Yeah, Boris and Chris, you can understand the emotions were running high, especially outside the convention center. More than 1,000 people showed up for a rally to show their support for banning assault weapons. But you can really feel the emotion, especially from those folks who say nothing's going to change. Former President Donald Trump rallying with the National Rifle Association as it holds its annual meeting just days after 21 people, including 19 children, were massacred in a school shooting in Uvalde.
The existence of evil in our world is not a reason to disarm law-abiding citizens who know how to use their weapon and can protect a lot of people. The existence of evil is one of the very best reasons to arm law-abiding citizens.
Instead of new gun laws.
It's the classic. I talk about this all the time. Way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. If you arm everybody, there are more good guys than there are bad guys, so the good guys will keep the bad guys in check. Again, that's the argument. The reality is, it doesn't work out like that in the real world. It turns out the more guns you have in circulation, the more gun deaths there are. That's what it is. If their theory was correct, we would be the safest country. We are not. We are off the charts when it comes to gun deaths. So understand, they keep repeating this. That point is a hypothesis. But you need to test the hypothesis. And when you do, it turns out it's just false. But they keep repeating it anyway. Just come out and say, we love guns. I love guns. We love guns. Even if it leads to a lot of deaths, hey, that's the price of freedom, baby. If they said that, at least it would be honest. But they don't say that.
The former president calling for more focus on mental health and school security.
What we need now is a top-to-bottom security overhaul at schools all across our country.
This place had massive amounts of security. It had a lot of security. They ran like mass shooting drills at this school. They had a resource officer there. The cop showed up and sat around for an hour. So increase the security is not enough of an answer. It's just not. And to the mental health point, I'd love to have that conversation about mental health. Do you want to have universal mental health treatment in this country? I will sign up for that right this second. Let's fund it right now, however many billions of dollars it costs. Let's get universal access to therapy and psychiatrists and, mental health drugs and all that. I'm down. But then if you actually bring that up, they turn on it and they're like, no, I don't want to do that. So then why are you talking about mental health? Why are you talking about mental health? You're just talking about it as a dodge to obfuscate from the fact that you want to do nothing to change it. Nothing. Nothing to change it.
Arguments echoed by others who addressed the NRA's annual convention in Houston, including Texas Senator Ted Cruz.
We must not react to evil and tragedy by abandoning the Constitution or infringing on the rights of our law-abiding citizens.
The NRA has condemned
his perception and his interpretation of the Second Amendment is just not accurate. This idea that there's an individual right to own a gun, it's not true. In the Second Amendment, there are the words, well-regulated militia necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. They ignore the well-regulated militia part. They ignore it. By the way, if indeed they were serious in their position, right, of like, there really shouldn't be any gun laws whatsoever, then why don't these guys advocate for rolling back the ban on full automatic weapons that we have in this country? It's weird because the NRA types seem to have grandfathered in that, right? Like, well, yeah, of course you shouldn't have fully automatic weapons. But wait, if you guys take all of your arguments to their logical conclusion, then why shouldn't you have fully automatic weapons? And the answer is because everybody understands there are some lines. The question is, where do you draw the line, right? Like, no sane person is going to argue for Bob down the street to have a right to nuclear warheads. Like, that's just not going to happen. So everybody draws the line somewhere. The question is, where do you draw the line? And so we've already acknowledged that there are going to be limits. Then the debate is just, well, where are those limits? So it's so, everything is so disingenuous in this conversation, and it drives me crazy. What about well-regulated militia, Ted? Got anything to say about those words in the Second Amendment? Well-regulated militia? Are we all part of a well-regulated militia? No. So you can have rules, you can have regulations, you can have laws, you can have restrictions. The question is just, what are those restrictions? Where do they apply? Et cetera, et cetera.
The Uvalde shooting, but decided to press ahead with its gathering, though several musical performers and elected officials canceled appearances in the wake of Tuesday's shooting.
NRA! NRA!
Across the street, a crowd of protesters gathered outside the convention site.
Yeah, I'm looking right at you, the NRA, today. I will not let any more of my peers die in a school!
Outrage over the gun group's influence and the high-profile Republican speakers the meeting attracted.
Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you!
Former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke, the state's Democratic nominee for governor, joined those outside the venue calling for action.
The time for us to have stopped Uvalde was right after Sandy Hook. If you have done anything good, it is the fact that you have brought us here together and that we are committing ourselves to act.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott was initially scheduled to appear in person, but sent a video message instead.
There are thousands of laws on the books across the country that limit the owning or using of firearms. Laws that have not stopped madmen from carrying out evil acts on innocent people in peaceful communities.
That's not even true, by the way. There are instances where a background check works to prevent somebody who would have committed a crime. There are instances where, if the law was applied in a universal sense, that certain mass shootings would have been stopped. I'm forgetting this. I think Virginia Tech was one of them, where the background check should have made it so this person couldn't buy a gun legally. And there were others. So, again, this idea of the laws won't work. Well, will they stop every mass shooting? No. The only way you would really stop every mass shooting is if you ban guns and confiscate all the ones that are in circulation by doing a gun buyback program that people are forced to participate in, right? Like, the only way you're ever going to stop all the mass shootings is get rid of all the guns, okay? Like, Japan basically totally banned guns, and they only have, like, 9 gun deaths a year. We have 39,000 a year. So, and again, even if you fully ban all of them, there's still going to be a handful of shootings somehow by some gun managing to slip in, etc. But the idea that, like, well, the laws don't work, they do. They absolutely. If you had a system that implemented a true universal background check, you had a system that had what's called the red flag laws, which is like, hey, this person's sort of acting crazy. Maybe we should be able to take their guns from them at this moment. If you had a system with high capacity magazine ban, if you had a system that included increased testing and permitting and training, you absolutely would limit the number of gun deaths. Now, granted, our gun laws are so lax that even if you do those reforms, even if you do the assault weapons ban and all that stuff, maybe you only cut it back 40%, right? You cut gun deaths back 40%. That's a lot of lives you're saving. You know, if you cut it back, let's say for argument's sake, you cut it back 50%. Well, we almost have 40,000 gun deaths a year now. So you just saved 20,000 lives. The idea that like, well, they're totally ineffective and they don't work. Nonsense. The way they wiggle out of that point is to say, well, look, we have new gun laws and you didn't stop all the mass shootings. It's like, yeah, but that's not the goal unless you are fully banning guns and confiscating the ones in circulation. That would be the true, like, zero gun deaths approach. That would be the only thing that would really limit it 90, 95%, 98% or whatever it is. You know? So, again, just weaselly arguments. Super weaselly arguments.
Yeah, you can see some of the signs that protesters left behind. Look, they're as tired of all the talk and the back and forth. They said they want to hear more concrete answers for how things can change. But that hasn't happened as of yet. And those emotions kept running high as the night went on. Boris and Christy?
Ryan, thank you so much. Republican Senator John.
I think that, I don't know if this was the case for the entire NRA convention, but it looked like at times the protest was bigger than the convention itself. So look at this. So this is inside the, this right here is inside the NRA convention. Doesn't look too packed now, does it? This is outside. This is the protest. Now, it's easy to, you know, sort of fudge stuff with pictures and take them from certain angles and hide parts of the crowd, etc. So I don't know if seriously the protest was bigger than the convention, but there were at least 1,000 protesters there. That's a lot. That's a lot of protesters.
Cornyn, who's leading Republicans in bipartisan talks with Democrats in Congress to find a middle ground on gun reform legislation, said Thursday that discussions among the group are, quote, just getting started. And Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, who was in on that meeting, says so far it's been, quote, very encouraging. CNN's Daniela Diaz is on Capitol Hill this morning.
Now, I read that the thing that is really coming up in these negotiations is red flag laws. So, in other words, what I mentioned before, which is like, hey, this person's acting really unhinged and kind of crazy and maybe threatening people, so legally we should be able to take their guns from them for a certain period of time. I mean, look, that's, you know, depending on how you write the law, that's a good law. I could support a red flag law, but do I think that that's enough? No, I don't. I think you will probably be able to prevent some shootings with that, but, you know, what are you going to do? Limit the number of gun deaths in the U.S. from 39,000 a year to 36,000 a year? Like, is that the goal? Look, I don't want to be flippant and glib, because it is a difficult debate. How do you balance freedom versus security? And this is a debate we have in other, you know, in other forums on other issues as well. So there's a real conversation there. But it's just strange how in this one specific area, we just almost totally leave safety and security to the side and focus only on an individual right to own a firearm, which is, again, as I said, tenuous at best, given the literal text of the Second Amendment. So if they come up with a red flag law, okay, good. I could see myself supporting it depending on the language, but I would like to see more than that. Look, on this issue, I'm a moderate. I think I'm right smack dab in the middle of the American people. I can support all the standard ones that they support. You know, I could support the universal background check. I could support the red flag law. I could support the high capacity magazine ban. I could support more testing and permitting. So, and that would make a real difference, but you'd still have a decent number of gun deaths. So we'll see where it goes.
Daniela, are you getting a sense from Senator Manchin that something is different this time around?
He said it himself, Christy, when he talked to reporters after meeting with this bipartisan group on Thursday. He said, of course, you just quoted him, he called it very encouraging, but he compared it to talks after the Sandy Hook shooting, also very horrific. He said, quote, I was here in 2013 after the Sandy Hook shooting, and getting people to participate back then until, you know, Pat Toomey stepped forward, wasn't anyone jumping forward. He's really implying that Republicans weren't eager to start discussions with Democrats on some sort of gun safety legislation or some sort of legislation that could help combat any future horrific shootings shootings, a pattern in this country that we've seen again and again. Of course, this comes after Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, the top Republican in the Senate, gave his blessing to Senator John Cornyn, the senior senator of Texas, to start these discussions with Democrats. Democrats, of course, being very eager to try to pass some sort of bill in the Senate, but they need at least 10 Republicans to sign on to any legislation to break that 60 vote threshold for the filibuster. Other than that, if they don't have those 10 Republicans to sign on with every Democrat signing on, no bill can pass. Now, I do want to reference that there is such a contrast between what...
I mean, you could eliminate the filibuster for this. You know, they don't even need to go crazy and do this super reasonable thing of eliminating the filibuster across the board. They could eliminate it just for this issue if they wanted to. They could give themselves more cracks at reconciliation and then tell the parliamentarian to piss off when they say you can't do gun reform through reconciliation. Biden can sign executive orders on gun reform and then tell the Supreme Court, okay, go ahead and slap it down. Because at least then they would be doing something. It would be proactive. You would get the immediate benefit of getting something accomplished. And then even if it does get smacked down in the courts, it would take a while before that happens. And implementing those reforms would be very popular, as all the numbers show. So, you know, it's the classic same, woe is me, what are we going to do? We can't get 10 Republicans. And, you know, Mash is like, oh, I'm optimistic. Yeah, my ass cheeks. How many times have I heard that in the context of other debates, whether it was Build Back Better or whatever? Highly unlikely anything gets done. Highly likely if you do get a piece of legislation that is approved by 10 Republican congresspeople, or 10 Republican senators, excuse me, it would be a trash piece of legislation that is totally just reform in name only with no substance there. So, again, we'll see. I don't want to be too much of a Debbie Downer here, but I'm just telling you guys what the history is. And I'm also telling you guys the other options that are on the table that the Democrats are most certainly not going to take because they're Democrats and they're pathetic.
But Senator John Cornyn is doing, of course, participating in this bipartisan discussion on some sort of gun safety legislation versus what Senator Ted Cruz, the other senator from Texas, is doing. Texas, of course, being where that horrific shooting took place at that elementary school. Take a listen to what Senator Ted Cruz said was to blame about the shooting, not faulting guns, but everything but.
Ultimately, as we all know,
I hate the way he talks. It's so fake. It's so political.
what stops armed bad guys is armed good guys. We must not...
Except when over 100 cops sit outside for about an hour as a madman massacres babies inside the school. In that instance, it wasn't the armed good guys doing armed good guys stuff. They were sitting there and, by default, aiding and abetting the psychotic madman who was murdering babies. It took a Customs and Border Patrol agent, who, to be fair, was a good guy with a gun, who said, why are you guys sitting here? This is crazy. And he didn't listen to them and went in and shot the kid. So it's just not a good time to be making that argument when the good guys with the guns were part of the fucking problem in this instance. So it's tone deaf. It's tone deaf. Read the room, Dippy. I mean, granted, he's at the NRA convention, so maybe these people would clap for what he's saying, but they're the only people. Everybody else in the country is like, wow. This requires massive societal change, doesn't it?
React to evil and tragedy by abandoning the Constitution or infringing on the rights of our law-abiding citizens.
Well-regulated militia. Well-regulated militia. Well-regulated militia. If you want to argue for your pro-gun position, do that, but do it honestly. Don't just pretend like your interpretation of the Second Amendment is the only reasonable interpretation of the Second Amendment, when on its face, it's an absurd interpretation of the Second Amendment.
Christy, I really want to emphasize that this shows that there's still such a divide within the Republican Party on how to handle...
There's not a divide. There's not a divide. Almost all of them are swimming in NRA money, and they're not going to be in favor of any reform. So it's too kind to say there's a divide, as if, like, whatever, 20% of the Republicans are like, I want to do the gun reform, but the rest of my party won't let me. Wrong. That's not true at all.
Gun safety legislation with, Senator Ted Cruz and Senator John Cornyn really showing that divide, with Cornyn, of course, participating in these bipartisan talks, leading these...
But again, wait until you see the specifics. It could be a red flag law that's just red flag law in name only with an impossible standard to reach, and so it doesn't have any substantive effect whatsoever. So again, she's being too kind. If you want to say Republican voters are open to gun reform, that's totally true. But she's saying among the elected Republicans, there's a split. No, there's not. There's not at all. I bet that The split is aesthetic, only aesthetic, so that some Republicans are smart enough to realize, oh my God, I look like a total callous asshole douche if I go out there and argue for more guns right now, so I gotta at least pretend to not support that. But substantively, they do support that. This is classic, like CNN clown has no idea what they're talking about type stuff.
Bipartisan talks, and Senator Ted Cruz still saying that gun legislation does not need to happen, that everything but is the reason to blame for the shooting. So it's going to be a really uphill climb, a long shot for Democrats to be able to get 10 Republicans on board, but they're going to try anyway.
Wouldn't it be nice if CNN told you the facts that I just told you about other options Democrats have? You can eliminate the filibuster for gun reform. You can give yourself more cracks at reconciliation and then tell the parliamentarian to piss off when they say you can't do gun reform through reconciliation. Biden can sign some executive orders and dare the Supreme Court. Okay, go ahead and slap it down, but it's going to take you a year or two before it gets through all the litigation. Would it be nice if CNN told you those facts? That they give into the Democrats' framing, which is like, woe is me, we mean so well and we want to do stuff, but it turns out we can just never do anything on any issue ever. And they just go right along with that. And they promote that idea. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. Anyway, there you have it. It appeared like, at times, the NRA protest was bigger than the NRA convention. Donald Trump and Ted Cruz have a total inability to read the national mood, which, by the way, that fares well in the sense that Trump is not as strong a candidate as he was in 2016, and maybe not even as much as he was in 2020. Because if you don't understand at a moment like this to not lean into guns, then, I said it a million times. He's morphed into the Fox News grandpa. Donald Trump is the Fox News grandpa. And given this speech and given it the way he did, really proves that. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.